Hello and Happy New Year! Welcome back to my channel. And welcome to a new series on my channel. So around this time last year, I started a series on my channel called Read It Down. And the whole reason that I created that series was because this is my unread TBR and it's huge. There's more shelves up top. It's large. And so my one goal for 2022 was to read down my own TBR, and I accomplished that. I mean, I still bought quite a few books, but I did read a lot of my own TBR, so that's really cool. I decided that I wanted to kind of step it up this year and do another series where I'm reading my own TBR, but in a completely different way. And I think this way will be a little more helpful for me in terms of being able to actually get things off of my shelves for good. So welcome to Love It or List It, the video series where I read books, and if I don't like them, I have to put them on Pango. So the way that this video series is gonna work is that basically this entire shelf here is books from 2021 or older. And so they have been lingering on my shelf for far too long, and I want to start reading them. I want to start prioritizing them. So every month I will give myself 4 prompts to pick 4 books off of this shelf that is my 2021 and older shelf, and I will read those books. If I like those books and I feel like they have the potential to be reread, I will keep them. They get to stay on my shelves. If I DNF them or I hate the book, they are being listed on Pango. I will list my Pango down below if you really feel inclined to buy from it, but this is not a way to plug my Pango. I just want to get rid of these books. So that's why it's called Love It or List It. If I love it, I can keep it. If I don't, I'm listing it on Pango. As for the prompts, they will probably change from video to video, and I might even challenge myself to try to pick up a series that has like 4 books in it and try to finish it in one of these videos. I don't really know if that's what I'll be doing, but that's a potential, that's a possibility. I also plan on having my patrons give me different prompts in the Discord as well that I can use for these videos to get them a little more involved in this series. But as for this episode, I've already selected 4 prompts. I'd like to say that this is by no means an original idea. I know that Emily Fox over the last couple of years has done like a prompt jar where she reads a book from a prompt jar, and if she doesn't like it, then she has to unhaul it. And so many people do this TBR will self-destruct in X amount of time. So the process of reading X amount of books to determine whether or not you're going to unhaul it is not a unique concept. I will actually link a bunch of videos down below where I've seen similar concepts. I just wanted to make it a little more fun and a little more exciting for me as a mood reader to be able to do a similar video idea. So anyway, let's jump into the prompts. I have 4 prompts for myself, and I'm going to choose them with you. You're gonna be in this process with me. So the first prompt that I have is to start a new series. The second prompt that I have for myself is to read a nonfiction book. The third prompt that I have for myself is to choose a physical book in an alternate format. So that can be a manga or a comic book. And the last prompt for myself is an audiobook, because I have so many books lingering on my Libro FM that I feel like this is the space to do it. Okay, I'm gonna do the audiobook one first, and the way that I wanted to do this was I wanted to go into Libro FM and filter it to show me the oldest books in my audiobook collection, and I'm going to read the oldest book in this collection that I haven't read yet. So let's filter it. So you can either filter it by different things or you can sort it, and so I'm sorting it from publication date, which is oldest, and I'll sort those books. And so a lot of these I've already read. So let's see, what's the one that I haven't read? Okay, so Anxious People is actually the oldest one on my TBR that I haven't read yet, which this was my first time reading Frederick Bachman. Okay, for the last 3 prompts, I'm just gonna go to the shelf and go through them, and I will come back to you when I have 3 options, or possibly more, hopefully just 3. I think I figured out the 3 books that I want to read for this video. So for the prompt to start a new series, I'm going to try to read The Keeper of Night, which I have started this at a time. You can see a few, maybe you can, I don't know. You can see a few tabs. I've underlined a few things. I've been thinking about this book recently. I don't know why. It's supposed to be like more of a horror fantasy from what I remember. And I don't remember a lot about this from when I read it. I just know that our main character is a reaper. So she takes souls, but she's half Japanese, half British. So I think that she is hated because of this Shinigami side of herself, and she lives in London. I kind of remember that from the beginning. I don't even remember how far I got into here. It definitely wasn't that far. And the second book in this recently came out, so it would be cool to read this and then read the second one not long after it, and I would knock a series off if I end up liking this, which I have really high hopes. I do have very high hopes. For the prompt to read a nonfiction book, I decided to go with Highway of Tears. I've had this book on my shelf for quite a while. Also, I have a lot of nonfiction books that have been on my shelf for far too long, and I really love reading nonfiction, but this year I just didn't read as much as I did in 2021. So I actually think that one of the prompts that will carry over to every single one of these videos, unless I decide to do something extremely different in one of these videos, is to read a nonfiction book. Anyway, I picked Highway of Tears because it has been on my TBR for a very long time, and I've owned it for a long time, so now is the perfect time to get to it. So lastly, for the prompt to pick an alternative format, I picked Destroyer by Victor LaValle because I have tried to read this on numerous occasions and I don't know why it's been hard for me to get into, I guess, but I think now's the perfect time. I'm still kind of in a spooky mood. I haven't really gotten over it, you know? So I think this would be really fun to read right now. And I love Victor LaValle. So I'm excited because this is a Frankenstein retelling, and I don't know. I'm hit or miss with Frankenstein retellings. There have been some that have been done really, really well and I love them, and others that I'm not the biggest fan of. But I trust Victor LaValle. I will be starting Highway of Tears first. I actually have reading sprints later today with Kim, so I'll probably start these on those sprints. I finished Highway of Tears. I don't really know how to talk about this just because I don't have like a rating for nonfiction, especially nonfiction that's covering a topic such as this one. In terms of enjoyment, that's also hard to talk about because it's not that I enjoyed this book, but I appreciated what this book was doing and what it was bringing to light. But I do think it's well researched and well informed, and I was really appreciative of the fact that the foreword actually talks about how, even though this journalist is white, she spent a lot of time in the community interviewing actual Indigenous people affected by the situation and interviewed them and their families and told their stories. So I really appreciated knowing that background going into this because I am a little bit weary sometimes of journalists diving into a story without actually involving the community that's being affected. So Jessica McDermott actually focuses on this stretch of isolated highway in Northwest British Columbia that has been dubbed the Highway of Tears. So if you are unfamiliar, there is a map in here that actually shows you exactly where it is. You can also look it up, but Jessica takes an interesting look at it because she dives into a few cases, and she ended up connecting that some of the older cases she goes into, many women in that family actually also have gone missing or have been found on the highway. And so she's diving into these cases and how they connect to one another while seamlessly talking about how the police and British Columbia have really done nothing about this situation. They don't investigate these situations, they make excuses for them, and it continues to perpetuate racism and therefore many of these women going missing. So there's a lot of interconnecting of this injustice with racism and the history within Canada to treat Indigenous people like second-class citizens. I think one of the other major books that really discusses the Highway of Tears is Killer of the Flower Moon. And the thing is, I haven't read Killers of the Flower Moon because I actually had a different idea of what that book was. I was informed a little while ago about what it actually covers. So it also covers the Highway of Tears and how the investigation of a lot of these cases has constantly failed and why the system fails Indigenous families and Indigenous peoples. And so this does a similar thing, but this really dives into cases. I can't really speak to Killers of the Flower Moon because, like I said, I haven't read it, but this really dives into a few cases and shows how they're interconnected and therefore how this is affecting the community and why there's this long history of indifference about this situation, even though it's clearly a problem, and it's clearly a problem that hasn't been solved in any type of meaningful way. So I definitely highly recommend this if you don't really know anything about the Highway of Tears. It does dive a little bit into the history in this book. I think there are probably better books out there that dive deeper into history that are probably written by Indigenous people. I did feel like this was a great starting point. If I hadn't already known certain things from reading a lot of memoirs and nonfiction, this definitely would have opened my eyes to a lot of stuff. I put a sweater on and didn't check my hair after, apparently. Okay, here's the thing. I'm reading The Keeper of Night. I don't know if that's even the right way for you, but this is what I'm reading. I am this far into it. I think I'm almost 200 pages in, which is not quite halfway, but close enough. I feel absolutely nothing about this book, and I don't know if it's how I'm consuming it, because sometimes I read it physically and sometimes I'm listening to the audiobook, and I will admit that I feel the audiobook is atrocious and the physical reading experience is definitely better, but I feel nothing for the storyline. I feel nothing about these characters. I feel for our main character, but I do feel like we were thrown into a situation that we didn't have any context for, and then she flees, and you're like, I don't know. I really feel nothing. I feel nothing about the writing. I feel nothing about the characters. I do like the world building. I think the world building is very interesting, although I'm still confused about a few things. The thing is that this is a duology as well, and being almost 200 pages into a book that's really not that long, I feel as if I should know more. I still feel like we're at the beginning stages of the story. It's still being... I don't know how to explain this. I just feel very little about this story, and it makes me want to DNF it, but then it also makes me want to start over because I am really enjoying the world building. But the characters, it's not that I don't care, I can't gauge them. I'm so confused about this book, and I don't know if it's me or the book. So that being said, I think I'm going to try to start over and maybe stick to it physically, because the audiobook, like I said, is atrocious. So I don't know. I'm going to try to start over, and if I start over and feel exactly the same by the 100-page mark, I will have to DNF it, because I just don't see how it's going to get better for me, or how I'm going to find any attachment to these characters or the story at all. I don't know what it is. I really can't pinpoint it. Anyway, I have something in my eye and my head hurts a lot, so I'm going to go. But yeah, I just wanted you to know that I'm halfway and feel no feelings, zero thoughts. Hi, I'm sad to say I think I'm gonna DNF it. I restarted it, got to pretty much the same place that I updated the other night about, where I was like, I'm not feeling anything for this, and I'm not. I'm feeling absolutely nothing. I literally have zero opinion on it, except for that I really enjoy the world building. I love the idea and the concept of this world and like the magic that we kind of are learning about. And I actually really like the writing in here. I think the writing is really great. I just have no feelings about the characters. I'm also a little bit confused about certain aspects within this world building, especially in terms of our main character. And also we just like start in the middle of this situation where we have no context about why our main character is being bullied. You know, we start to figure it out as we go, which is fine, but it was very confusing and jarring in the beginning. And that whole situation leads our main character to go to Japan to try to reconnect with her Shinigami roots. So I just think the whole setup of it and like the confusion of the beginning made me feel extremely disconnected from it. But I wanted to keep reading because I like the writing and I love the concept of this. I love the concept of the Reapers and the Shinigamis, and you know, like it's pretty dark and grotesque at times, and so I like this idea of like a fantasy horror aspect. But I was like halfway, I took the bookmark out. I was almost halfway through this book. I was about here. I was pretty sure I was on chapter 12. And I feel like this is moving so slowly, and it's only a duology. So I would have imagined that either these books need to be bigger or they need to have a better pace and better explanation of where we're going, why we're here, how are we going to get there type of thing. I almost feel like this first half has just felt like an introduction the whole time, and maybe that's why I don't feel connected to anything. And like, I'm not saying that this is a bad thing, because in a lot of fantasy books, I do tend to take at least 150 pages to really get invested and to feel like I have my bearings in the world. But the fact that this is a duology and it's like maybe 400 pages, it's not even 400 pages. This is 393 pages. So it's almost 400 pages. I just feel like it should be moving a bit faster. The thing is, I'm not going to keep a 3-star read, and I feel like if I finish this, it's just going to be a 3-star read and I'm never going to move on with the second one, which is fine, because that means another series that I can just check off my list, you know. But it's sad because I really did want to like this. I do think though that if this author comes out with another book and the premise is intriguing enough, I would definitely try to read it, because I love the writing style in here. I think the world building, there's just something off about it, and I'm not connected to the characters, and as we know, I say this all the time, my connection to characters really determines how much I'm going to like a book. So I feel like this is going to be 3 stars no matter if I DNF it or if I continue on, and it's going to be listed anyway. We already know from the beginning that if it's a 3 stars that I know that I don't want to move on with the series, I know that I'll probably never reread, it's not going to stay on my shelf. Reread ability is very important to me for books to stay on my shelf. Even if it's a 5-star and I know that I'll never reread it, I will probably get rid of it. I guess I could give you a little bit of a synopsis. Basically, this is about our main character, Ren. She is half British, half Japanese, but currently lives in Britain or London. And in London, she is considered a reaper, so she takes the souls of people. But because she is half Japanese, she is also half Shinigami, which is similar to a reaper. They do take souls, but they also have a few other powers that you know of in the beginning of this book. I'm sure there's more explanation on those powers as you get deeper into the story. I just haven't gotten there. So like being introduced into Ren, you know that on top of her ability to reap souls, she also has the ability to manipulate like fire and light. And the assumption for her is that that is part of her Shinigami powers. And so in the beginning, there are some other reapers who are a bit higher than her that attack her. And so in the midst of the situation, which is really stressful for her, she ends up exploding a gas lamp and it burns the other reapers, and she is on the run and she knows that she's going to get into a lot of trouble. So she takes her brother and herself onto this boat and they go to Japan. She's hoping that once she gets to Japan, she'll be more accepted within the reapers there and that she'll be able to hone in on her Shinigami powers better. So this is a DNF at, I don't know how much percent. I would say it's probably like 48%. I wasn't exactly halfway through it. So now I'll be moving on to Anxious People, which is the audiobook selection. And I'm really interested in how I'm gonna like this because I've never read Frederick Bachman. I think I keep trying to call him Richard Bachman. If I've said that in earlier clips, I'm so sorry. I mean Frederick Bachman. Getting ready to go to work and I've been listening to Anxious People. As you know, that was the one that is the oldest book that I haven't read on my Libro right now. I have so many mixed feelings about this. On one hand, there are moments where I'm like, wow, this is really sad and impactful. And then on the other hand, I hate these characters. So basically there's a bank robbery that happened and you are getting a bunch of different perspectives of people who were held hostage during that bank robbery, along with some of the things that led this person to rob a bank and some of the stuff about their family and their children. It's all over the place. It's almost like little vignettes, but it all comes together. I don't know how to explain this. The structure is very interesting. There are interviews with the police trying to figure out if the bank robberer is hiding in the apartment that he held the people hostage in because he kind of disappeared. It goes through different timelines. Like you're hearing stories from the moment the robbery happened, you're hearing stories after the fact, which is primarily the interviews, but you're also hearing things about these people who were being held hostage like way before the situation happened. The person who held the bank hostage, you're learning about what led him to this moment. So that's like a whole timeline in and of itself, but it's interspersed between really small chapters. And it's funny because I've never read Richard Bachman before and I see his books everywhere. As a matter of fact, I also have this one. I found this at a used bookstore a long time ago. And if I'm honest with you, I don't actually hear that much about this one. I hear a lot about a man called Ove and the Beartown series. I think there's 3 books in it. It's all about a hockey team. I think one of the characters assaulted a girl in the town, and it's the aftermath of that. But Anxious People is my first time ever reading Richard Bachman, and I've heard so much about him, but it's kind of unexpected, I guess, me going into the story, the way the writing style is panning out, the way the humor is. I think this book is supposed to be humorous. It's not really landing for me. I think our sense of humor is vastly different, which is fine. So there's that. And the characters, I don't know if you're supposed to not like them in the beginning. I'm literally almost right at the 50% mark. I think I'm 51%. And I did read a review where somebody was like, it's interesting, I'm giving this 4 stars, but the first half of this book, I did not care about the characters. And then the second half of the book, I was like sobbing through it and really started to care about the characters. So I'm interested if I have that shift as well, because there are some characters that are being interviewed that I am definitely more interested in their stories than others. But I would say out of all of the characters that have been interviewed, I don't care. I don't really like them. But I think what keeps me reading this book is that there are moments where Richard Bachman drops in a little something, like a little tidbit of wisdom or a little thing that's just like devastating, and you're like, where the fuck did that come from, first off? And secondly, you're right. You're absolutely right. So yeah, I'm just waiting for this book to like devastate me at some point, because that's what I know about Richard Bachman, is that he devastates his readers in every single book that he writes. I don't know if it's a goal or just a personality trait at this point. So this is interesting. I feel very little about it. Hi, we're right here again. I don't know why. We're not going to talk about my upper lip. I'm a hairy ass woman and I get it waxed regularly, and the wax woman did me really dirty, and now I'm just dealing with the aftermath of that. So you're going to pretend like you did not see. You didn't see a thing. Anyway, we're actually here because I finished Anxious People by Frederick Bachman. I keep calling him Richard Bachman, but it's Frederick. I don't know. I have a lot of mixed feelings about this, because I do agree with the review that I probably popped up on the screen. If I didn't, I will pop it up right here, where the first half, if not more than the first half of this book, I hated these characters. They were insufferable to me, and I don't think that I would have anything positive to say about the writing style, the jokes, the format of this book. But then the last like 20%, it gets really emotional, it gets really sad, and you do start to feel for these characters and start to understand that like you're kind of seeing most of these characters in the worst points of their life. And so as a reader, I realized that maybe what he was doing was you're judging them in this moment that is like the worst moment of their life. And they're in a hostage situation, which are they? Questionable. But it's like, is the moral of it that we shouldn't judge people when we don't know at what points in their life they're at. And then in this last point of the book, they're like in this not good place, but they're talking through issues they have in their life, and they kind of come together as a group of individuals who all have their own issues and are just trying to do the best they can. I do think the last 10% is pretty emotionally driven, charged, if you will. I just don't know that that warrants me giving it more than 3 stars, because I didn't like this book for the majority of it. The last 20% is the only time that I was like super engaged. The other weird part about this reading experience for me is that while there were all of the things that I didn't like in this book, and I'm not sure that I like the writing style, I definitely didn't find anything really funny in here. Although it's questionable if maybe those jokes land better in the intended language, but who knows? It was a weird reading experience because there were all those moments where I was like, God, I am not having a good time. And then there would be like a tidbit of wisdom. There'd be a tidbit of something that happens or something that was said or a situation with a character where I was like, oh, this kind of makes me feel something inside. It was weird. It was the weirdest reading experience. I'm very curious if like the structure and the writing style in this book is like normal for him, because I think that I explained it sort of in my last update. It's hard to explain. There's a bank robbery that's happening and there's like 7 people in the apartment and you get different perspectives from them, and it's interweaving like their stories the day of and the police interview. You have the police as 2 characters that are kind of dealing with their own situation. They're a father and son, and they're both on the police force, and that's its own story. And then there's just like little stories. So I'm just really curious if it's because of the story structure in and of itself and like what he was trying to do here and the vibe he was trying to create. I feel like the vibe is you're getting interrogated by the police, and that's how this book was supposed to feel. It was just like jumping from chapter to chapter, back and forth from past, present, and like from character to character. And so I think it was supposed to kind of emulate like being interrogated by the police, which is why I think the police were also so heavily involved in the story. So I'm curious if like that structure is unique to this story and he doesn't normally tell stories like that, because maybe that's also what didn't work for me. So yeah, I feel like I would give it a 3 stars just because the last 20% definitely was more impactful for me and felt like a higher rating than the beginning portion of this, but it's definitely not like the last half of this impacted me so much that it should be a 5 stars. So I'm on my lunch break right now, and I kind of like go scurry off to my car every lunch break to get away from everybody. But I wanted to update because I finished Destroyer before I came to work today, and I just didn't have any time to update you before I, you know, came here and did the thing at the job that I have. I don't have a lot to say about it. I didn't really enjoy it. I guess I would give it a 3 stars just because I did really appreciate the retelling. I appreciated what was happening in this book for the most part, but I've come to find that I don't like books that have like a government agency coming after a scientist who's gone off the rails type of thing, you know? And that's what's happening here. This is in parts a Frankenstein retelling, but also like an expansion of Frankenstein, because the original Frankenstein's monster lives in this book, exists in this book. So they're very much a part of the story, but scientists have always known that Frankenstein exists and is out there, and they've tried to figure out ways that they can like get rid of him. So that's why it's called Destroyer, because they've created these almost similar Frankenstein-esque monsters, but they're stronger supposedly than Frankenstein, so the hope is that they will destroy Frankenstein. But in the midst of all that research and them trying to figure out how they can destroy Frankenstein, another scientist loses her son and decides to create another Frankenstein's monster with her son's body. But this had that twist of like a big time science agency that's like connected to the CIA, and the government gets involved and like is hunting down the scientist and trying to stop her. Meanwhile still trying to stop the original Frankenstein's monster who's out there. And like, I realize I don't like that trope, and maybe that's why I don't really like superhero stuff either, because it tends to have that science-y experiments gone wrong type of thing, you know what I'm saying? Maybe that's why I don't really like superhero stuff much, because I realized in this book, as much as I love Frankenstein and I usually enjoy Frankenstein retellings, this one like didn't fully work for me, even though I think some parts of it were very interesting. I'm having a hard time figuring out if it's the writing and the storyline that bothered me, because sometimes I felt like the writing was a little bit cheesy, but I also felt like it was an homage to Frankenstein and Mary Shelley in general, so like I can appreciate what was happening there. But sometimes I felt a little bit cheesy, but more so it was just like the whole scientists coming after this other scientist who gone off the rails. Like, I don't love that trope, I guess, but otherwise I definitely want to reread this. And it makes me sad because I typically like Victor LaValle, but I guess I haven't read enough of his work to say that he is a favorite horror author for me. I've only read 2 things by him, and he has a couple other things out there that I want to read, which will probably make an appearance in these vlogs, to be honest, because they're on my backlist. So yeah, but I will say, like most Victor LaValle, there is a lot of social commentary in here that I always appreciate him adding into the horror sphere. So I did enjoy that aspect, which is also another reason why I would give this a 3 stars, because he always adds in social commentary into his horror, and I always appreciate what he's doing with that and like what he's challenging within horror tropes in the horror community. He's also challenging, you know, a lot of the racist horror writers like H.P. Lovecraft. So I always appreciate those aspects of his writing. Anyway, I have to go to a staff meeting, so can you tell I'm excited? Let me adjust this. books. So this bucket here is what I have listed on Pango. This is stuff I unhauled a while ago. So this is where our unhauls are gonna go. So it's pretty obvious what I'm gonna be unhauling, but there is a little caveat because I am unhauling Destroyer, but my partner wants to read it. So it is going on their shelf. Otherwise, I am also listing The Keeper of Night, which this one makes me really sad because I really had high hopes. I really had high hopes that this would be one of the YA books that I really loved, and unfortunately it's not, and I don't really have a desire to go back to it. But I will be keeping one of the books out of the 4 that I read. I am keeping Highway of Tears, so I am keeping one book out of the 4 that I read. I will be deleting Anxious People off of my audiobook collection, or offloading it, I guess. I don't know if I can actually delete it off of my device. I'm sure I can. I'll figure that out. But 1 out of the 4 is not horrible. I mean, to be honest, going into this video series, I kind of expected that if it's been sitting on my shelf for quite a while, it's probably something that's not gonna stay on my shelf for much longer. But the optimistic side of me is really hoping to find some new favorites, and really hoping that some of the books that sounded interesting however many years ago that I got it actually are. Although, you know, judging from Read It Down, I don't know how well I'll do with that. So that was the first episode of Love It or List It. Hopefully I will do one of these once a month, if not every other month. If you've made it this far and you have nothing to say, feel free to leave a little zombie emoji, and I will talk to you next time. Bye.